Welcome, everybody, to this month's Tech Chat podcast. I am your host, Rich Tessel, and I am seated next to my ever-so-dashing co-host, Brandon Kasner. Brandon, how are you doing?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
You know, short of things like data center power going down and losing an entire stack of infrastructure, thank you, Flexential, for that, I'm doing pretty good.
vSAN's got you covered. It's okay.
vSAN only got you covered when vCenter are up running. That's all I got to say. So, but nonetheless, you know, that was interesting. That's a once in a lifetime sort of thing. Anyway, this month we are going to do something a little different. Brandon and I were talking about, topics and ideas, and it was his brilliant idea. So if this is terrible, you can blame him, to kind of talk about like individually what we do for a living. So this month's podcast is about me and what I officially do. We have a list of questions and stuff that Brandon's going to ask, and I'm going to try to not just ramble on forever, but
yeah. If you guys like this stuff, let us know. We can
Absolutely.
do a series on what I do from day to day, what John does when he's not video editing and screaming at Adobe Premiere, as well as we can maybe find some other people who have different tech-ish day jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's really, it's one thing to look at a job title and be like, I think I know what that person does day to day, but then you talk to somebody like, oh, you do that and so much more. Everybody does that and so much more, right? Like,
Yeah, right,
and other duties as assigned as I've seen in my life many, many times. So, with that,
so let's start with what's your illustrious title? What grandiose name do you have, and how long is it, and how many letters does it have in it per word?
Esquire, senior, junior. No, so my day job these days, I've been doing this now for, I guess, a little over a year officially, is a senior security engineer. That's my day job. Now, I have spent, many a year in the past working as an infrastructure engineer and a system administrator, network administrator, and all those kind of things that, those roles had aspects of this in a general sense, but, kind of have now culminated into like, security engineering for what it's worth. Yes.
And well, I was thinking about like how long have you been doing that as well?
So I mean, officially in this role, I've been doing this now for a little over a year. So
Okay.
this was an opportunity to kind of switch gears for me and change from being an infrastructure engineer who works primarily with like virtualization and network configurations and managing and maintaining and implementing stuff into more of a security related role. So it's.
Are you like just dictating policies on a day to day, or are you like,
Are you asking me what I do?
kind of, but like, I guess more because I've from the security engineers I talk to, there seems to be kind of a divide. There's like the engineers who do the like, this is a false positive, this is a thing, I'm quarantining this, we're talking about this. And then there are people on the other side who do like, I want to meet CISA standard 5. I want to meet PCI DSS blank with compliance to meet security standards. So do you do it all? Do you do...
The answer to that question is I do it all.
Okay.
But I can add some flavor to that. Depending on the size of the business you work for, you will find that smaller companies that have security initiatives and security departments will have a few people doing a lot of things.
Okay.
The bigger the organization gets, the more siloed you end up becoming, and depending on your role, like you might be an analyst, which is what you're kind of talking about, is a person who's looking at logs, who is trying to track down whether something's a false positive or an actual positive hit, and then chasing down potential, issues, and then escalating those to people above them, senior level stuff like that. But the organization I work for right now is a bit over 1,000 employees. So it's a relatively, I mean, it's still technically considered like a small business. I don't know
So SMB kind of ends at 500, and it just says 500 plus is enterprise. So
take it for what it's worth. But I work in a department of 2 people. My job specifically when it comes to it is, obviously there's the analyst side of things. I have tools and systems that I've implemented in place. I'd love to talk about the tools anytime, but that will feed up and basically provide potential incidents or cases that you can go through and try to figure out if there's something going on. Because, in an organization of any size, you've got network switches, you've got firewalls, you've got, servers, and everything is creating a log and saying those logs. And as an example, on a daily basis, I think that there's somewhere in the org that I work on, probably somewhere around 2 to 3 million logs that come in a day. And like, I mean,
It's just unmanageable.
it's impossible for a human being to maintain and to go through that, right? And because all logs are essentially kind of created equal in that sense, it's really hard to say which one is a high risk or not. And so you use tools that aggregate all these logs together, and they look through the logs and they go, okay, this is related to this one because of X, Y, and Z. And so it starts to build what they call cases or an incident, where then you go through and you look at these, like, oh, that's a false positive. Yes, it looks scary. Oh yeah, Mimikatz looked like it kicked off, but no, it was just actually a domain controller resetting its password. Like that stuff happens, and deal with that way. But so that's the analyst side of things. I do that all day long. I mean, I don't want to say like I'm sitting in front of a console looking at this stuff, but you get alerts and you address the alerts.
Rich
you look
personally watches every log that comes over.
You seen the movie The Matrix, where this is like stuff's just like coming down the screen, like, yeah, that's not me actually. No, I don't do that. That'd be crazy. So there's the analyst part of it, and then there's also the the policy side of things. So the organization I work for, it has goals to follow NIST standards. So they want to do 853 is the NIST standard that they want to follow.
Like NIST standards are huge. It's
like, amazing.
NIST standards, at least from my experience on the infrastructure side, is the kitchen sink.
It can be,
like, just do everything you can to be secure. And not everything you can to be secure makes sense to do at once.
Right. Yeah. Well, security is in effect always at opposition for productivity and flexibility. Like I was telling my wife, like, you see security and your ability to work and be secure as two separate bubbles in a Venn diagram that have a cross, right? And in the middle, where those two bubbles come together, that's the sweet spot. If you are 100% secure, the business can't work because you've locked everything down and people can't do anything. If you're 100% flexible and you're able to do whatever you want, then you have zero security. So trying to find that center is
then you're a crypto exchange. Is what
then you're SPF. Right? That's exactly right. So that's the thing that, like, when we're talking about NIST standards, and if you start and you try to do all of them instead of narrowing down to specific subsections that are applicable to your business, you end up being in a situation where most of them don't apply.
Yeah.
Like, you're not a bank, right? Or you're whatever your business is.
Keep track of credit card info.
Right. You
don't need that one.
You don't take personal PII stuff, personally identifiable information, and you don't take that stuff in. So you don't need to make sure you're doing all those things. But there are subsets of it that apply to every business, like encryption at rest, or make sure that your backups are immutable so that in case you did get compromised, the backup storage systems that hold your backups don't get ransomware as well, and now you can't get to restore your backups. And also basically, like, you've got, like, the standards do everything from, like, you have a firewall and it prevents people from coming into your company.
Firewall does not have open.
Yes, like any come in, like stuff like that, to more very focused aspects of it. But and again, it's really all comes down to what part of those standards are applicable to your business and make sense to apply, and then from there you can say, yes, we are NIST 853, for example, and you can tell your customers and your company.
Yeah. So how much do you think of your stuff is dictated from, like, a compliance standpoint versus you? Because, like, obviously Rich has a personal way he likes to secure his infrastructure.
Sure.
And that may be higher or lower than what the bar is. Do you get told by someone that, like, the hammer comes down, you need to meet this bar, and you have to basically convince the rest of the business that you need to meet this bar or bad things happen?
So the funny thing is, I think that the biggest trend to push a company into following certain standards and requirements more has to do with these days what your cybersecurity insurance company mandates of you.
I was going to get there too.
Yeah, so that's, like, a lot of it, like, you want to follow the best practices. Like, I have to hand it out to CISA because they work so hard to provide guidelines for every business of every size to try to make themselves secure. It's really like a do-good entity in the government. But
boring blogs, great info though.
Yeah, I mean, it's not supposed to be exciting. It's all.
Yeah.
But in the end, it's going to come down to what makes the needle move for the business. And, like, most organizations will try to secure some form of cybersecurity insurance. And when they do that, they'll come back and say, oh, well, do you adhere to any NIST standards, or do you have MFA, or do you have a firewall? Like, and so a business who really wants that, because mitigating the risk of being compromised is done through insurance these days still, right? Because the cybersecurity insurance gives you more than just like, they're not just going to give you, oh, here's money, like you wreck a car, here you get a car back. They're also going to provide you access to companies that can help you recover. They're going to give you access to like legal support and stuff like that to help you. There's even cybersecurity insurance that will help you negotiate with ransomware gangs.
Which I thought you weren't supposed to do.
You shouldn't, but you know what? When you're a bank,
Frowned upon.
yeah, like you don't.
When
you
you're
don't,
a casino like Caesars
yeah,
or MGM.
MGM. Like, and how did that work out for them, right?
Yeah,
So the point being is like, they provide all those services, but to get there, they expect you to have a minimum level of certain things. And so a lot of business decisions on cybersecurity are driven by what they have to adhere to get their cybersecurity insurance. You should always be doing more than that because they're looking for the hot button things that are currently the zeitgeist of attackers. But realistically speaking, there's so much more that you can do that you should be doing. So
how much do you, on like your terms of day-to-day, go from, installing a $100,000 firewall versus like training your users? Are you guys more user training focused, or do you feel like you're more trying to protect your edge?
So big iron purchases like that it really only happen certain periods of time, like once every 5 years or 7 years or 3 years, whatever they either amortize against or whatever. Like those sort of capital expenditures they don't happen all that frequently, right? But you do spend a significant amount of time, and thankfully a lot of the training aspects are done mostly through automated systems. Like everybody's favorite and less favorite thing is like fish testing. So
every day,
we
always catch someone, and it's always the same 5 people.
Oh my gosh, it's funny. Like when I catch my boss, like it's
caught your boss.
We've caught lots of people. Like you would be. I don't think you'd actually be surprised, but believe it or not, there's a lot of people who just skim something and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna click that. And so
it scares me that those people might be in the C-suite.
Oh, you should expect it. Like the ones that you see the most, or
Jeez.
You see a lot of people because it is human nature to give something a 10-second look and then just be like, oh, that passes a sniff test. And we're not talking about the type of phishing messages that say your Nigerian prince has your $1 million waiting for you.
We're past that.
Yeah, like we're talking about people who have like entities that have done the effort to go in and research your company, target you as a user because, hey, you got a LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
And you put your name, your company name, what you do there. So you already know that about you. So if I can send you a message and be like, hey, I'm XYZ and I'm the name of this company, you are more likely to click on that link. So
That's fair.
We as human beings provide so much base material for social engineering to happen. So phishing and phish testing I'm not going to say it's still like the number one, but it is like one of, if not the biggest way that bad guys compromise a network. Targeting you, sending you a well-crafted message. They grab your creds, they win your trust, they'll get in through some means, and then from there they escalate the privileges, they set up their,
That's fair.
their persistence, and then that's how it goes, right? I don't think you get nearly as many. Oh, I had a vulnerability on my firewall and they got in, unless it's FortiGate,
Sonic Wall,
or FortiGate's really like in my book. FortiGate is like on my like lowest tier list because when they have vulnerabilities, which they've been having a lot of, they're typically like CSS like 9.8, and they're like, you just look at it sideways and it pops a shell and says, come into my network.
But, Cisco had one of those recently. And
yeah, they did. And yeah, so, but back to the testing thing. So a big part of that is you can automate that.
Yeah.
And the nice part of it is that we use platforms. There's a company called KnowBe4. They make pretty good. It's a SaaS solution that, what's integrated into our directory service. So we can have a list of people and they have testing that's done in an automated means that like sends the low hanging fruit too. Yeah. If you pass, if you report that as a phish, you're like, okay, good job. Here's your cookie. But then you get put into I'm going to send you a more crafted message that you're more likely to click on. And then a subset of those people get caught and then you test them. And then the people who are habitual repeaters or offenders, then they get remedial training, right? They get sent to the company's LMS, learning management system platform to like take the test and read this and why it's so not smart. And So that's
fair. I've seen some pretty convincing ones too. When I did help desk, I remember one person came up to me and she's like, I reset my Windows password, but it doesn't seem to be taking. And I looked at the email and it was an Azure AD reset. Now, luckily at the time, the company wasn't at Azure AD levels yet, but like that's a serious thing. And if you didn't look at the email bar and had, random numbers.microsoft, .org or something,
right.
It looked like a Microsoft mail. It was incredibly good CSS they had spent time, at least at the time, crafting. And now you can probably do all that with AI.
The AI is going to change the game too, because AI is more like the stuff that we're starting to see right now is that the language barrier is the toughest part. But for people who are not in your native language speakers to try to write something that's compelling.
Yeah.
But if you have the power of the internet and you say, write me a really compelling message that will get somebody to click on this link, assuming that the AI has access to publicly available information, it's going to write you a pretty convincing thing. So,
and unless you're an English scholar who knows the grammar errors that it makes, you're probably not going to pick up on that.
That's the incorrect use of the Oxford comma. So that's not real. But
so when it comes to this stuff and you're doing, log analysis stuff, you have some favorite tools?
In the industry, you either bring stuff into a SIM, which is a log aggregation tool. A SIM is a log aggregation tool like you've heard of Splunk.
Splunk? Okay.
Splunk is a log aggregation tool. Sumo Logic is another one. Those are kind of the old school way of doing things. Most people are moving from SIM to something like a SIMLite or an XDR, which stands for Extended Detection and Response. And they have functions like a SIM where they aggregate all the logs, but then because there's a little bit of machine learning and AI that's built in these platforms, they're able to piece together and build like a scenario that shows that it's not just a one-off, it's actually a chain of events that transcend like a single device. That's where the future is, because once those things are detected, they can automatically respond if you let them, like, oh, this is clearly a compromised Active Directory account. Let's go ahead and disable the account, right? And so I actually use an XDR that brings them together, builds incidents or cases that kind of lay out what it thinks is going on. And thankfully, they're always false positives, but that's, there's a lot of noise in the system, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we use for that sort of thing, because human being can't process the amount of logs that are coming in.
Yeah, especially at 6 million or sorry,
Yeah,
2 or 3 million a day, and aggregate over time.
It's amazing. Like just the amount of noise that like vCenter creates.
Yeah.
And it's just like, moved VM from the host 5 to host 7. You're like, okay, that's cool. But you also get like authentications and logs. Like, is that a backup account? Why did it log in the middle of the day? Like that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because everything is integrated. Like every platform in a medium, large size business, you don't have bespoke user accounts for one particular system than another. You are using a unified single sign-on, whether it's via Active Directory or Azure or Okta or just insert name of that, right? You've got all of that stuff is being centrally managed, because that way a person gets hired, accounts are automatically generated and accessible to all of your systems.
Nice. And so when it comes to like, I guess, what am I trying to say? Like figuring out I guess here's the next thing. So what happens when your XDR catches someone? Does it immediately, like, let's say like comp AD account, it locks it and then you get a notification? What is that process of like, I think someone's in my network and this is an active
right
thing?
So I do not at this time, at this juncture, actually use the response component of it, because everything is always a false positive, and my help desk could be spending all their time resetting accounts and that kind of stuff. So there's an alert process that goes through, right? And depending on the severity or its expected severity, like what it thinks it is, it's dealt with either by the help desk first. Like a good example, let me give you an example. So Azure AD, one of the things that you get normally from Azure when someone logs in is you get Azure logs everything. I mean, assuming you're not the government and it's just like throwing away.
And assuming, I think they finally,
that's
they finally put it on the base tier, but for a while you had to pay for like the E5 licensing.
You had to have E5 to do it, which is absurd.
Absurd for security.
Yeah. So let's say a good example of a typical kind of event that would happen is if you forget your password and you go to an SSO Azure property and you get your little Azure pop-up box and you type in your email address or your user account, you type in the password and you hit go and it's like, not wrong password. You're like, okay, try again. I changed it. Nope. If you do it a bunch of times, and then you successfully guessed it, right? That's like, hey, that's a big deal because we think someone just was able to guess a password, right? And so that sends out a chain of alerts. It's like, you need to do this. So believe it or not, that happens so often that it's the lion's share of the kind of events that happen. So I just send the alert to the help desk, and the help desk contacts the individual and says, "Do you have some problems logging in?" And they're like, "Yeah, I did. And I guessed it." And you're like, "Cool, you're resetting your password now. Thank you." Because it's just like,
Doesn't that make them forget it more?
you know what? It might
Like,
be a vicious cycle.
isn't that a vicious cycle?
think
Like,
that-
you just took my memory now that I committed, and now you've made it even harder to remember the next time.
Yeah, that's a fair point. But
But I mean, better safe than sorry, right?
sure, write it down. But the thing is, that's not like, in my organization, just to be clear, like behind that first time auth with user and password is then an MFA prompt. So even if there was a bad guy who was able to guess a password, they still have to go through the MFA process, and they have to pop up the Azure app or
On all users?
all users.
Oh man, that's nice.
It's a cybersecurity requirement.
100%. Yeah,
So
no,
you
I'm impressed that it's out there for everyone.
Yeah, it's.
I can see admins, but like applying 2FA to the general public, I guess now they're probably, your bank has it. Everyone has it in some form.
Yeah.
And if you don't have it, set it up.
Right. Exactly.
Not kidding. Do it now. Like, stop what you're doing and go set it up.
Hit pause on the recording here.
It's not, it's not the end all be all of security, but boy, is it better than just a password.
Yeah. That's the justification we use too, because like there's not a bank that you use internet banking that doesn't require you to have some sort of two-factor, whether it's
That's fair.
Unfortunately sending an SMS message with a code that you then enter into a web page or whatever.
Awful.
They have something. And so it's not a far jump to be like, okay, now you need to do this for everything in your company. And let's be clear, once they authenticate, they're given a token. The token has a lifespan and is a trusted thing. And Azure is smart. Azure knows when a person all of a sudden jumps to a different IP address in another country and goes, even though you have a valid token, I'm going to ask you to MFA again. Like,
Why
so
are
you'll
you
catch
in
that
Russia.
yeah. And then for the, you could do things there. You can geo-block stuff. So Azure says you can't have anyone in Russia. Like, especially right now with the Ukrainian conflict in Russia, like the United States, people in the United States, we can't do business with Russians. If you were a U.S. company,
Turn it off.
And that's what we did. We just said, okay, even if we were to have salespeople there for whatever reason which we don't, but if we did, we turn off the entire access to the company. That doesn't stop the bad guys from using a VPN.
No.
This is just to cut down the noise and the script kiddies and stuff like that. But yeah,
that's fair. So after hearing all this, if I'm really excited, what skills do I need to get, to start on my cybersecurity journey and maybe get into, a position of your stature? So
I will say the first thing I want to add to that is I've told this story to Brandon. I'm going to tell it to you. When I was a kid and I was in high school, I remember right before I graduated, they brought all the high school seniors into a classroom and they sat us down and they said, look, whatever you want to be when you grow up, these are the jobs that will be driving the future in the U.S. economy. And they were, at the time, technology, just like blanket technology, and healthcare.
AOL.
Yeah, because it was like the birth of the internet back then. So
beginning of .com.
Right. So that they basically sat down and said, go into technology and you'll probably have a pretty good life, and go into healthcare and you'll probably have a pretty good life. If you want to be a basket weaver or you want to be something else, you might have a harder time because we have plenty of those. And as cold as that might sound, I really appreciated that. But I'm going to tell you now what it's like now. Right now in the world, the one thing that we have the least of is cybersecurity people. So much so that I think I read an article that showed that the U.S., the Biden administration was looking at finding ways to relax immigration rules for qualified candidates who knew cybersecurity to come into the United States, because we just don't have enough people to do it. Like, the government doesn't have enough people to do it. And they're looking for analysts. They're looking for people to sit down and just read through those logs and be like, yeah, this is a false positive, right? So back to I guess the reason why I wanted to lead with that was cybersecurity is a great, if you are interested in this stuff, there are so many fields, and it's the future. It's like what I would tell, if my kids get interested in technology, they're like, you should look into this. I'll be their classroom. But how do you get there? Well, there's full disclosure. I went to college a few times, but I didn't make it through. I'm not a college educated person, and I don't believe in technology you necessarily need to be. So if you're not a college person or you're not great in school, don't worry about it. If you have a passion for this kind of stuff, technology in general, just follow your passions, you'll get through it. But the bare bone basic thing, go look at basic security certifications from CompTIA, like Security Plus, get a Network Plus certification, because most cybersecurity stuff is going to be focused around network connectivity and network systems, because the bad guys can't come into the organization if there's not a network connected to
The
it.
safest box is the one that's not connected to the internet.
Air-gapped boxes are the safest ones. Unless, Tom Cruise comes down on like a little string and he's like putting the USB. Did they use USB sticks, or was the floppy drive in that? That was a long time ago, so I don't know.
Probably was floppy drive at the time.
Yeah. And the little bead of sweat falls off his head. He's like, catch it with his glove, that kind of stuff. So understanding how networks work from not necessarily a super, super deep level, but understanding, what network protocols are and how networks interconnect and what a router is and a firewall is and what their jobs are and that kind of stuff. And that's what a Network Plus cert from CompTIA would be. All the CompTIA certifications are just baseline industry standard tests. You can sit down and read a CompTIA book and then walk into a testing center and pass them, because it's not applied learning. No. It's
literally just read the book,
right,
and do what it says.
Right.
You'll even learn about old things like PCI connections and PCIX and printers. There's a lot of printer info on the A+ one, and I don't know why it's there.
I mean, and side note, you could do it in A+ too. I mean, that was my first cert was an A+.
They're called stackables now. You're supposed to do A+, then network, then you're supposed to do security as your wrap up.
Yeah, and those are good ideas. Next after that would be to look at the ISC squared. Like there's the security an organization that does security training and testing for certifications. Certifications are really useful to get you in the door, especially if you're not a college educated person who went through a security program at a college and has a shiny piece of paper that says, I did 2 or 4 years at a college, right? So certs are a way to circumvent that, assuming that you read the material, you internalize the material, and then you test on it, and not just grab a brain dump off the internet and walk in there and be like, I can regurgitate this stuff. I'm not saying those aren't useful, because it does teach you some things, but it's not giving you the fundamentals, right?
Yeah, and counter to popular belief, don't hack someone. They won't hire you. I know that you hear about that all the time. No, usually it ends up with a bunch of, Escalades showing up to your house and a knock saying,
Black Escalades.
Please join us in the car.
It's more like, excuse me, ma'am, is your son home? He's only 13. Come with me, son. That's true. Like, that's funny that's ever been something that worked into the mental lexicon of like, oh, well, if I compromise this company and then they show them what I did, they'll want to hire me. Like, that's like I want to get an account at a bank, so I robbed the bank and I gave them their money back, and I'm hoping they'll give me an account. Like, that's not how this works. Don't do that. That's not good. But the other thing is, and I hate to say this because it's tough for a lot of people, especially younger people, to hear. It takes time.
Yeah,
it sucks, but like you have to, with any sort of technology field, where you get to a senior level or an architect level, you need to have had lots of time on the clock. You can't go and test your way or college your way out of getting to a level like that. You'll always have to start somewhere, and then you'll have to build up. You'll have to build up your resume showing that you worked at a place for X amount of years and you did these things. You're exposed to these things.
What would you say like a good entry level to look for is then in cybersecurity?
I mean, there's
a certain title, keywords, stuff like that.
Security analyst,
Security analyst, okay.
Like junior security engineer, stuff like that. Those sort of jobs, like there are government websites. Again, I'm not necessarily touting going to the government, because the government will pay you good to start, but you'll never see any like the private sector growth you'll get. So, but there are websites that you just go to Indeed or to LinkedIn Jobs and just search for security analyst. And it's just like, boom, there's so many things. And I tell this to other people too who are looking for jobs. You have to understand that any job you go into where you're getting, into a position, they're going to expect you to know standardized baseline things, but then they're going to teach you the ways and manners of the company that you work for, because every company, sadly enough, is a snowflake, right?
It's all tribal knowledge.
It is.
Like you can have your confluences and your SharePoints, and you can have a great documentation process, but some dude who worked back there 20 years ago knows exactly how it was set up and is the sole source of the information for that system.
Yeah.
And I'm sure as you expand more, and again, our dynamic now is like enterprise is so much hybrid cloud. It's so much like, where do you want to put your stuff? Do you want to
Right.
put it in Azure? Do you want to put it in AWS? And so like that's just a changing landscape that you have to deal with as a cybersecurity engineer.
Yeah.
Just anything else you want to go off on?
I think the other thing to add to it is that like there are a bunch of diverse paths you can take in cybersecurity. You can be a person like me whose job is to really ensure that a company is protected and that the tools that you've implemented are working right and that they're communicating out the proper information, that the watchers are correctly watching and responding, and be part of like making big decisions that direct a company. But there's also other parts of cybersecurity where your job is to, you can work for a company like Mandiant where you are doing cleanup for a company that's been compromised. Or, you can work for a company that does red teaming. By the way, red teaming is where you are contracted by a business to try to compromise their network through whatever means possible within the terms of the contract that you've signed, keep in mind. But you can't just go in there and be like, here's a gun, I'm in, right? But like there's a whole bunch of diverse things. And if you want to get into like reverse engineering and finding bugs and vulnerabilities and doing bug hunt kind of stuff, you need good software engineering backgrounds. Whether it doesn't have to be college stuff, but you need to know how to write code. You need to how to leverage tools that exist to try to break things and find vulnerabilities so that then you can hand those vulnerabilities off to companies to fix, right? There's that they typically call that a security researcher role, but it's basically a guy who loves to break things, guy or gal who loves to break things, right?
Do you have a red and a blue team at your current place? By the way, red team is usually the offensive people who try to break stuff, and blue team is the defenders who laugh if they win.
Yes. No. So like a company like mine, that's such a focused discipline that you contract it out. You go find, and there are third-party companies that will do continuous red teaming.
Yeah.
There'll be third-party companies that you do an individual engagement where you set the parameters of which they're allowed to try to attack. Because, if one of the compromises was, can you get into the physical building and plug into the wall? That's literally part of a red team job, right?
I was going to ask that. Do you deal with any of the physical stuff? Like I know a lot of times you can, especially for banks, when they do pen testing, they'll also do physical pen testing where someone's gotten, they found a fake badge or they looked at someone's badge really quick and grabbed a photo and now they have a fake badge and they try to get in. And lots of people, when they just see a badge, will just open up whatever.
Right.
To go through. Is that something that you deal with on a daily basis, or are you more separated from that stuff?
There's the firing a potato gun with USB sticks into the Iranian parking lot of their reactors. Like doing that kind of simple stuff where you're like, I've dropped a USB stick in the parking lot to see if someone picks it and plugs it in.
And Marion from finance just walked in and went, "Oh, what's this? Stupid." CompTIA computer.
You'd think that wouldn't be something that people do, but it is. People do that stuff all of the time. All of the time.
I mean, you found a USB stick. There could be anything on it. It's just, I've been taught it's bad, and I just break them in half. But I want to know.
There's
especially when they're 500 something gigs. You're like, that's lots of storage I could use.
Yeah, I honestly think that's it. I think that it comes down to like, there was a time when USB sticks were precious.
Yeah.
And that buying one cost real money. And so, you kind of like when you found a USB stick, you're like, this is valuable to me. I can use this. You don't think about the payload that's on it potentially. You're just like, hey, I got a free USB stick. But yeah, you shouldn't plug those in. You should not plug those in, but so we do, like I said, we do fish testing. We do the common stuff that we can make part of the training of employees, but red teaming or red teaming, blue team kind of stuff has to be farmed out to somebody who's made a business on doing that kind of stuff.
Trying to get in somewhere.
Right. And there's a side note. There are companies that do something that they call purple teaming, which red plus blue, right?
Yeah.
It's purple. And what it is, it's the cool, and I'm trying to push my company towards for our next engagement, is they will sit next to you and they will red team with you by their side, and they will show you all the things that they're doing so you can learn that information. And then the blue team part of it is that they'll show you how to recover from it and repair it. And so it becomes a purple team.
Interesting.
It's an awesome idea. Right?
Yeah.
So that's something I'm looking forward to for sure. But yeah, I think that's all I can think of on that.
Yeah, you think that covers the day in life security engineer?
Yeah, I mean, don't forget, the day in life of a security engineer is just like the day in life of anybody, where a big chunk of it is sitting in meetings, making PowerPoints, presentations, consulting on things. Like, just because there's the cool parts of it, there's also the grind of it.
There's also the 2 a.m. We have a program we use called X Matters, which is the alert program.
Yep.
But it's the 2 a.m. alert because everything is cryptoed. And you're now trying to figure out why your primary data SAN is full of Monero crypto miners and doing nothing else but...
Yeah, but those, again, the tools part of it. The tools are kind of the coolest part, I think, of the job is going through. There's so much innovation in the space of cybersecurity and so much like great ideas. There's also a ton of like generic BS ideas that really don't amount to much in qualitatively moving the needle. But there's some really great technologies out there that companies are making that do things that you're not a victim. Like eventually you will get compromised. That's the sad note is that I hate to say this, but it's only a matter of time before every single company has some sort of event, whether it's basically minimal to MGM grand, right? That's just the thing that happens. Every company will have a compromise because there are too many human beings in the mix, no matter how great your plans are. Like my military buddies say that, what is it? Like your plan never survives your first engagement.
Yeah.
Right. And that's basically it. Right.
Well, and like you talked about human error, I don't know if we've officially determined the cause of the MGM, but I believe that is because Okta put out a notice being like, hey, we're seeing people get compromised by people social engineering their service desk to reset their Okta admin password. This is just a warning.
Right.
And then that MGM thing dropped and they use Okta and everyone is like, it's just a little too much of a coincidence
exactly.
But you can't account for that. Like you can install the highest end EDR, XDR, whatever acronym you want to use as your security software, and you'll get beaten by your help desk being able to reset your admin.
Yeah, don't let your help desk reset your admin account password.
Turn that off right now.
Yeah. So so the way you handle that is really where the good part of the job is, right? There are a whole bunch of other concepts that you would learn as part of that. Like you have a good company who's prepared for a cybersecurity event will have a run book. They'll have a process that they run through when that happens. It'll include getting lawyers involved, getting certain heads of the company together, getting your war room or your group built together, whose job is to handle that, get the technical people. So that's all part of like the process. And so that's one thing that those certs will teach you. Part of those certifications and those basic cybersecurity certs will teach you is, the standardized means and processes for which businesses work, right? So you get that fundamental that way.
No one teaches you though that you have to convince your C-suite that they need to invest money into this because cybersecurity, no matter where you are, is expensive. It's just the cost of doing business so that you don't get compromised and cost you more business.
Right. Yeah, I think that the phrase that we use a lot is never let a bad situation go to waste. And, it's thankfully when you have a customer or a business partner that gets compromised and you know about it, it's really beneficial to go to your executives and be like, see what happened to these people? They weren't prepared. Are you ready to get prepared? And then they're like, yes, please. And then because it's damaging to a company. Yeah. It's damaging. Now, I do think that most companies just like MGM is going to recover. Probably. They'll turn down the percentage on the slot machine payouts and they'll be back in a month or two, right? But most businesses recover and they do fine, but it hurts your public image. It hurts your investors and it hurts your employees, especially your employees when they lose because the company did something and now their personal information is publicly available. Like that's the worst.
Well, and like you think about IP too, NVIDIA went open source only because they got comped.
Right. Oh,
that. That's a policy shift for them and they just had to deal with it. Right. So you don't want to be in that position where you have to open source your company.
Yeah.
No more distributed encrypted backups for ransomware.
Right. You just got to pay to unlock them. That's all.
Yeah, they're on Tor now. They're secure.
So I think that's about it. I mean, if you're interested in a career like that, I highly recommend you start looking into it because there's no better time than now to get started. If you join our Discord,
You can bother Rich with questions personally.
I love talking about this stuff because there's so much nuance in it. And look, I've been doing it for a long time, but I still learn so much from other people.
Oh yeah.
Like you just do. Like people are like, well, I've been doing this, and it's like, oh wow.
When like
That's
every failure is a new spectacular failure you didn't account for.
Right. Yeah. And how do people recover from that? Then you like a community gets better the more you learn from others, right? And so I can't tell you how much I've learned. So that's join our Discord. Is the short answer to that is join our Discord. And if you got questions, I'm happy to talk to you about it. And I think that probably does it for.
It covers any.
Have I sold it? Do you think I sold the job?
I think you sold it. If you're not part of our YouTube subscribers, get subscribed. Big shout out to them. They keep us doing this.
Yeah.
And go buy some swag. We got some refined swag.
We're working on some.
We're working on some good stuff. But you got anything else?
I think that's it. Other than we'll put up a video or like a playlist over there, probably between Brandon and I, like over here like this. And
I make John do that stuff.
Yeah, we'll do that
about it.
And we'll see you guys either have you hear us or see us next month on the next podcast.
Sounds good. Catch y'all later.
See ya.